What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin, and today I was going to show you how I care for my peach Bougainvillea. Now, as you can see, I do have the peach Bougainvillea, and this is one of my favorite plants, one of my favorite bonsai trees. Just because of the leaf structure and the way the leaves look, they're so diminutive and petite and just kind of elegant. I love that pretty gorgeous green, emerald green color, and the ovate smooth edges and the ovate shape of the leaves. And then you can see right in there at the very top, well, you might not be able to see, but I can, but he's getting a little flower. He's getting a little peach flower. And that hence the name, the peach Bougainvillea. And the bark on here is stunning too. It's got that kind of smooth, grayish kind of look, and it's got a little bit of some lichen, and it just looks stunning together on here. I love the way that the contrast of the green leaves with the smooth bark appeal and the little lichens on there. It just looks really indicative of a tree that you'd find out in Mother Nature. But today I wanted to show you how I care for it and how I will go ahead and repot it. Now, this is a 3D printed pot that I printed myself. Cameraman actually helped me, and it is stunning. I love the look and the size, and just the design on it is very simplistic. It's got a bunch of holes in the bottom for drainage and then some wiring. So it's a really cool bonsai pot, and I think it actually came with a saucer underneath, but I elected not to print that for good reason, but it's still stunning. I love that color that I picked for it, and I think it'll contrast that smoothness of the bark and the emerald green of the leaves rather nicely on this bonsai pot. And then I wanted to go over real quick on my tools that I have all set up for this procedure. And first and foremost, I do want to show you that I do have my little trusty fold out placemat mat that I use to catch all that debris. Everyone's always like, why do you do this indoors? So I do have something underneath me to catch all this waste and the detritus and everything else that's going to fall out and onto my floor, that it's not just going to go there and I'm just going to leave it because that would be dirty. But I will go ahead and put this together and then set it up underneath me, and I will work on getting him transplanted into his new home. Next, in order of most importance to least importance, I have all my tools. Most important is your isopropyl alcohol that I'll use to sanitize any kind of tool that will even remotely touch the plant at all, even with my chopstick. It's probably not going to pierce anything, but I will still sanitize this just because it will be around the roots and I could accidentally scratch the bark or something. And you don't want to invite any kind of pest or disease or anything like that when you're just trying to repot your pot and your plants. Next, I have my pruning shears, my sharpened, freshly cleaned pruning shears. You do not want to cut on any of your plants with any dull or jagged or unclean, unkempt sanitizing shears. So since I went ahead and touched on that, I will go ahead and give it a light spritz with my isopropyl alcohol. Anything 70% or higher would be fine. I use about 90%, but you can go higher than that and get like 99. But as long as you have about 70-75% isopropyl alcohol, you should be good for sanitizing your tools. And then next I have my chopstick, which is a really versatile tool. I've got my root rake, and then I have my wire crimpers, and then it can also be used as the pruning shears to actually get close and flush up against the bark, but it'll get it flush against the bark and not have some kind of protruding outer covering to cover up that mess if I were to use something like that and I can't get it flush up against the actual stem. Alright, so first thing I want to do is go ahead and fill the pot, kind of give it a light little squeeze here. Loosen up the root mass. These trees, or these vines rather, have a very fine root structure. So take your time. You don't want to crush anybody, and you just kind of want to gently loosen it up, squeeze some areas, and you're just trying to separate the soil from the pot. So we'll kind of turn it over. Oh, okay, that's nice. All I gotta do is just kind of lift up on him, and I will keep him underneath me. And I've got that little pot there with the mat to actually help catching of this falling debris. And like I said, before the show started, I went ahead and sanitized my tools, so I will go ahead and begin loosening up all this root mass. Now I know I probably don't have to tell you, but in order to get a tree like this into a pot like that, you're going to have to cut a majority of this root mass off. This would stress your plant out, especially if you were to cut on top too. Luckily, I don't have to do too much in the way of pruning the top side. This is mainly going to be a under the pot pruning session. And all I'm doing, in case you can't see, is just lightly scouring the root mass here. Just trying to knock the dirt out. I'm not trying to rip all these roots out. They're very fine and thin and somewhat insignificant, so you don't want to actually kind of rip through everything and break it all. You just kind of want to gently come in and loosen around the root mass here. And just take your time. I'm in no hurry. Alright. We're making a little bit of progress. There's a lot of perlite in here. And then next I'll come in here with my fingers and make sure that the middle is about where I want it to be. Now this circular shape is not going to fit in this rectangle. I may not have graduated college, but I know a little bit, particularly about shapes. So just hold on to the stem, knock a little bit more of this out of the way, and then just kind of rake around the sides here. Just loosen it up. And ideally, if you know you're going to be doing a lot of this, water your plant 24 to 48 hours before, and it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier to come in here and knock all this stuff off and free up all this root mass here instead of hacking away like I'm doing. Alright, that looks pretty good. Next I'll just come in here with my fingers and try to loosen up any little bit that I see here that I don't want to be put in the new house. And there's a little bit here I want to knock off. So take your time and be gentle. Alright, I've just got this last little part that is being stubborn that I can't seem to shake. So, in the words of Arsenio Hall, let's get busy! Alright, that's good enough. I think the scissors, the pruning shears will help with that. Alright, and as you can tell, I took about 85% of the root mass, close to 90% off here. And that gives me a great opportunity to look at the roots and get familiar with them. You want to look it over and make sure that you don't smell anything that may indicate that it's rotten. You don't see any kind of black discoloration or mushy roots. And that everything pretty much looks uniform in color. If it's all discolored, like I said, mushy or smells, this may indicate that you actually have root rot. So just look your roots over and check them out and make sure that they are okay and they look okay. And this tells me that my plant is rather healthy. No problem with any kind of fungal disease or any root rot or anything of that nature. So next I will go ahead and take my pruning shears and just lightly prune up anything that looks like it's gonna run into the wall or hinder the plant from fitting down in there the right way. I don't want to trim too much off because I've knocked a bunch off combing through it. But I do want to trim off some that I know isn't going to help it fit down in there just right. Particularly on the bottom, because you want it to sit in there and not actually push it out of the pot. Try to get it as close as you can. And like I said, this last little part up here on the heel is just really sticking out and bothering me. Can't get it with the pruning shears, and I can't get it with the root rake. But my fingers seem to be okay. There we go. Alright, now let's sweep the rest of this mess off the table and onto the mat below. And then I will kind of look him over and see what I want to be the front, what I want to be back, and the side. And as you can tell, he's kind of leaning a little bit, so I'll probably have that be the front side. And it's really unfortunate that this branch broke off right here, but it's calloused, and the leaves seem to be doing just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that anyway. Cut it off. Like I said, this is my really important part because this will actually get it most flush with the actual stem, and then it won't have to actually form this huge callus. Perfect, and it just allows it to scab up rather nice and neatly over that part that I just broke off. Alright, so this will be the front of the pot, and then I'll put him in kind of like that, and now he won't stay in there like that because of gravity. So I'll set him off to the side, or lay him off to the side rather, and then I will get my wire out, and then I'll use some wire to kind of hold him in place. And if you know me at all, I don't like to use wire a whole lot with my bonsai trees. I have a tendency to forget if I've left it on there, and the next thing I know, my tree looks really sick because it's got that wire wrapped around it and it's not able to fill out rather nicely. Yeah, alright, cool. So what I'll do is I'll mark this here in the middle so that I can tell where it's going to sit. And then I'll look it up and see where my holes are for the wire. And then I will feed it through. And then I will place it in my lap. And then, as you can probably tell, I have a little bit of soil down in here. These trees like a little bit of an acidity boost and prefer slightly acidic soil with a pH of around 5.0 on up to 6. So I go ahead and make my own mixture, and then I'll come in with my Tiny Roots Premium Bonsai Blend. And this stuff is perfect. I love this stuff. It helps with water retention and feeding and not compacting. And it looks great in the pot too. Alright, well that worked out perfectly. And then next I'll use my chopstick to kind of spread some of this sediment around and then make sure that the bonsai soil is kind of packed pretty good around the roots. And I'll pick up some of this mess on the table and then just try to work all this in best around the roots. Now, if you want to know how to care for a Bougainvillea as a bonsai tree, it's not hard at all. Typically, these trees make excellent bonsai candidates. Their leaves aren't too big, especially if you go the dwarf or the miniature route. And their flowers are prolific bloomers, something that avid bonsai collectors and growers alike like a lot. It's hard to say. So they make excellent candidates for bonsai if you want to actually grow one yourself. Just remember though, they are tropical plants, so they do need to come in when the weather starts to dip around the 50s. They typically don't like it to be too cold. They can tolerate a light frost. They can kind of freeze down to the ground, but they will come back. But if they're in containers and they freeze, they're more than likely going to die. So I always try to bring my bougainvilleas in first before I bring my other plants in too, because these guys don't like it too cold. They need a lot of sunlight, at least 6 hours of direct sunlight each day, especially if you want them to flower profusely. You need to give them a lot of sunlight to go along with that. They're not very thirsty plants. You don't need to water them that often. I think I water mine maybe once a week. With this guy though, his leaves will start to sag, and I can tell he's thirsty. So if you're not sure, just kind of look your plant over and they'll tell you whether or not they need more water. But if they're in containers like mine, then they should be watered at least once a week. Like I said, you want to kind of lift your pot up and feel if it's really lightweight. Look at your leaves. If they're not flowering, the bracts aren't flowering, then they could be not getting a whole lot of light. But it may be a water issue too. You may be watering too much. Like I said, these guys prefer to be on the dry side. So if you're not sure, err on the side of caution and wait a couple of days and then water, because they prefer to be dry more often than they need a drink of water. So don't water them too often either. Soil mix needs to be rather loamy. Loam just means it's equal parts sand, clay, and silt. So you want it to be organically rich, but draining really well. And the loam of the sand will actually help with the drainage, and then the clay of the loam will actually help with the organically rich parts too. So make sure that your soil will drain easily, but do have some nutrients in it as well. Ideally, they are heavy feeders, especially if you want them to have their great prolific blooms that we've come to love these plants for. And ideally, if you do, you need to feed them quite a bit. Typically, the NPK ratios need to be about even. 5, 5, 5, 10, 10, 10 is ideal. You can overfeed your bougainvilleas, especially if you give them too much phosphate or too much nitrogen. Those can actually encourage a lot more green growth and then discourage a lot of the flowering as well. So try not to overfeed yours too much. But ideally, container ones need to be fed about every 7 to 14 days, or you could get away with it once a month depending on if your plant is established, or the size of your plant, or the actual breed of your plant. Ideally, I feed mine about once a month, and I use a liquid slow release fertilizer. I don't mean I use both. I use the slow release pellets throughout the growing season, and then every once in a while I will come in with some liquid fertilizer and give it a little bit of a boost every other month or so, just depending on how hot it's been and how much he's flowering. And then in the springtime, I'll wake him up with some fish emulsion. They do go dormant some in the wintertime, so you need to cut back on the watering. And if your plant's getting a lot less light in the winter, ideally they all are, so you don't want to water them as much either. And you don't need to feed them too much in the wintertime as well. Pests, they do have problems with aphids and loopers or caterpillars. They will eat on the plants, and especially the leaves. And some will eat on the roots too. So you just want to kind of keep your eye on that and make sure you don't see a lot of bite marks around the leaves or any kind of chomp marks out of the edges or any kind of circles eaten out of the leaves, because you may have caterpillars or you may have aphids that are coming in there and feasting on your plant. And like I said, they will kind of feast on the roots too, so whenever you're repotting or transplanting, make sure you're looking those over too, because if you're getting a lot of short, stubby kind of roots, more than likely you're having a pest come in and eat on your roots, so keep an eye on that as well. Alright, all in all, I think that is a fantastic job. He looks great in his new pot. especially with that Tiny Roots Bonsai Premium Soil. I love that stuff. It goes a long way. I always order the 2.5 gallon bag, and it's helped me out tremendously with all the bonsai trees I have and all the repotting that I have to do for all these videos and whatnot. I'd like to give a special shout out to my patrons, especially my top tier tree patrons like Thuyen N. Thank you. I'd also like to give another shout out to my other patrons like David and Heather. If you were interested in supporting my channel through Patreon, please check the link in the description box below. Any donation you give helps to keep the plants alive, the LEDs running, water's cleaned. Any donation is greatly appreciated. What does he say? Join the Patron, we'll do a shot at Patron. Alright guys, well this has been Justin reminding you that if you can, go out and plant a tree. Let's reforest the world. And while you're at it, leave me a comment and let me know what your favorite type of Bougainvillea is. I think next I'll go ahead and do one on the Pink Pixie. That one's stunning. And don't forget, hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. Until next time, take it easy, have a good one, and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube. That's your one line, you can't remember that? Plant prudently?